The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered like a jewel box. Its crystal chandelier is casting prisms of light across gold-trimmed tables. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Central Park's springtime glow, where cherry blossoms dance in the April breeze of 2025. Soft jazz from a live quartet mingled with the clink of champagne flutes and the low hum of New York's elite philanthropists, CEOs, and socialites draped in tuxedos and couture gowns. The air buzzed with purpose. Tonight's gala was raising millions for education, a cause that drew the city's most powerful to this opulent Manhattan stage. But beneath the glamour, a storm was brewing, one that would spark a movement no one saw coming. AmaraJackson stood at the edge of the ballroom, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. At 32, she was no stranger to standing out in spaces where she wasn't expected. But this was different. The Bronx-born Latina, a public school teacher and community advocate, had spent her life fighting for her students in underfunded classrooms. Tonight, she was here as an honored guest, one of 10 recipients of the prestigious Horizon Teaching Award, invited to represent her community at this high-profile charity gala. Her emerald green gown, borrowed from a local designer who believed in her cause, hugged her frame elegantly, its deep hue catching the light as she moved. Her dark hair was swept into an intricate updo, a small rebellion against the sleek bobs and loose waves around her. In her hand, she clutched a worn leather notebook, its pages filled with advocacy notes and dreams for her students, a reminder of why she was here. Amara took a deep breath, smoothing the gown's fabric as she scanned the room. The invitation had promised a seat at a prime table near the stage, a rare honor for someone like her, whose work thrived in the shadows of the city's poorest neighborhoods. She'd spent weeks preparing, practicing her acceptance speech, and imagining the chance to network with donors who could fund her school's crumbling library or outdated science lab. This was her moment to shine, not just for herself, but for the kids who called her Ms. Jackson with trust in their eyes. Ms. Jackson, a young usher in a crisp black suit, approached, holding a clipboard. His smile was polite but hurried, his eyes darting to the growing crowd. "Your table's this way. Table 3, right by the stage." Amara nodded, her nerves easing slightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. She followed him through the sea of guests, weaving past women in glittering sequins and men with cufflinks. That cost more than her monthly rent. Whispers followed her, some curious, others dismissive. She caught fragments of conversation. "Who's she with? Must be a +1. Amara squared her shoulders, her chin lifting. She'd faced worse than curious stares in the Bronx, where she'd once convinced a city councilor to restore funding for her school's art program. This was just another room to conquer. The usher stopped at table 3, a round table draped in white linen, adorned with a centerpiece of orchids and candles. Its position was perfect steps from the stage, with a clear view of the podium where the gala's keynote would be delivered. Amara's name was printed on a gold-embossed place card, nestled between those of a tech mogul and a museum curator. She traced the letters with her fingertip, a small smile breaking through her nerves. AmaraJackson, Horizon Award recipient. This was real. She belonged here. She set her notebook on the table and slid into her chair, the velvet cushion soft beneath her. The ballroom's energy pulsed around her, laughter, clinking glasses, the quartet's rendition of "Fly Me to the Moon." She allowed herself a moment to soak it in, imagining her students' faces when she told them about tonight. Maybe she'd bring back a signed program or a photo with the mayor, something to hang in the classroom as proof that dreams could take you anywhere, even from a Bronx tenement to the plaza. But the moment shattered with the sharp clack of polished loafers on the marble floor. A shadow fell over the table, and Amara looked up to meet the cold gaze of a man in a bespoke tuxedo. He was in his mid-50s, with slick-back gray hair and a platinum cufflink engraved with the initials PC. His presence commanded attention, the kind of man who walked into rooms and expected them to bend to his will. Behind him stood 2 others, a younger man in a similar tux and a woman in a silver gown, both watching with thinly veiled amusement. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice smooth but laced with condescension. "You're in my seat." Amara blinked, her brow furrowing. "I'm sorry, there must be a mistake," she said, keeping her tone calm. She gestured to the place card. "This is my table. AmaraJackson," her eyes an award recipient. The man Preston Caldwell, as she'd later learned, didn't bother to look at the card. His lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No mistake," he said, his voice louder now, drawing glances from nearby tables. "This table's reserved for my party. Major donors, you understand. You must be at the wrong one." He paused, his gaze raking over her gown, her notebook, her very presence. "Maybe check with the usher. They sometimes mix up the guest list." The word guest landed like a slap, its implication clear. Amara's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression composed. She'd heard that tone before on parent-teacher nights, in city hall meetings, in every space where her Latina heritage and working-class roots were seen as less than. But this wasn't a classroom or a council chamber. This was a ballroom full of New York's elite, and every eye within earshot was turning toward them. "There's no mix-up," Amara said, her voice clear and firm. She tapped the place card again, her nail clicking against the cardstock. "My name's right here. If you're supposed to be at this table, maybe you should check with the usher." A murmur rippled through the nearby guests. The younger man behind Preston snorted, while the woman in the silver gown raised a manicured eyebrow. Preston's smile tightened, his jaw twitching. "Look," he said, leaning closer, his voice dropping to a patronizing whisper. "This table's for real donors, not people like you. Be reasonable. There's plenty of room in the back. People like you." The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. Amara's breath caught, not from shock but from the sudden clarity of what she was facing. This wasn't about a seating chart. This was about who Preston Caldwell thought belonged in this room and who didn't. Her mind flashed to her students, to the girls who looked like her, who dreamed of spaces like this, but were told they didn't measure up. She thought of the notebook on the table, its pages filled with plans to give those kids a chance. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. She wasn't moving. Amara straightened in her chair, her eyes locking onto Preston's. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said, her voice ringing with a quiet power that silenced the murmurs around them. "This is my table, and I'm not going anywhere. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the organizers, but I suggest you lower your voice before you embarrass yourself further." The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Preston's face reddened, his composure cracking as he realized she wasn't backing down. The younger man shifted uncomfortably, while the woman in the silver gown whispered something to a nearby guest. Amara's heart raced, but she kept her gaze steady, her hands resting calmly on the table. She'd faced down bureaucrats and budget cuts. She could handle one entitled donor. Preston opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the usher reappeared. His clipboard clutched tightly. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his eyes darting between Amara and Preston. "Yes," Preston snapped, straightening to his full height. "This woman's in my seat, and she's refusing to move. Fix this now." The usher glanced at Amara's place card, then at Preston, his expression faltering. Sir, Ms. Jackson's name is on the seating chart for table 3. I can check with the organizers if there's been an error." "An error?" Preston cut him off, his voice booming now. "Do you know who I am? Caldwell Investments funds half this gala. I don't need to check with anyone. Get her out of here." The usher flinched, but Amara didn't. She leaned forward, her voice low but cutting. "You're making a scene, Mr. Caldwell," she said, catching his name from the cufflink. "And you're wrong. I'm an award recipient, invited by the gala committee. If you keep this up, you're the one who'll be asked to leave." A gasp came from a nearby table, followed by a whisper. Did she just say that? Heads turned, phones subtly raised, capturing the moment. Amara felt the weight of their stares, but she didn't waver. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who'd been told they didn't belong, every kid in her classroom who deserved to dream big. She'd claimed this table, and she'd hold it. Preston's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said. "This isn't over." He turned to the usher, jabbing a finger toward the stage. "Get the organizer. Now." The usher scurried off, and Preston shot Amara one last glare before stepping back, his entourage following. The ballroom buzzed with whispers, the tension thick as the jazz quartet played on. Oblivious to the drama. Amara exhaled, her hands trembling slightly as she opened her notebook, pretending to read. But her mind was racing. She'd stood her ground, but the fight was just beginning. Preston Caldwell wasn't the type to back down, and the gala's organizers would have to choose a side. Would they stand with her, a teacher from the Bronx, or with the millionaire donor who held their purse strings? And what would happen when the whispers in the room turned into tweets, videos, a viral storm that could change everything? As the quartet's music swelled, Amara looked out at the glittering ballroom, her resolve hardening. She'd come here for her students, for her community, for the chance to make a difference. And no one, not Preston Caldwell, not the organizers, not the weight of this elite world, was going to take that from her. But what happened next would shock the room, and the world beyond it, in ways even she couldn't imagine. The Plaza Hotel's ballroom shimmered with an almost surreal glow. Its chandeliers casting fractals of light across the gold-trimmed tables. The soft jazz from the quartet wove through the air, but the melody felt distant, drowned out by the electric tension radiating from table 3. AmaraJackson sat poised in her emerald green gown, her worn leather notebook open before her, its pages a quiet anchor in the storm. Her heart thudded, but her face betrayed none of the fire burning inside. She'd just faced down Preston Caldwell, the hedge fund titan who'd demanded her seat with a sneer. And now the ballroom was alive with whispers, every eye drawn to the standoff that threatened to upend the gala's polished facade. Preston stood a few steps away, his bespoke tuxedo pristine, his platinum cufflinks glinting as he gestured sharply at the retreating usher. His entourage, the younger man with a smug grin, and the woman in a silver gown hovered behind him, their murmurs blending with the growing hum of the crowd. "This is absurd," Preston muttered, loud enough for Amara to hear. They let anyone in these days. The words were a blade, slicing through the air with deliberate precision. Amara's fingers tightened on her notebook, but she kept her gaze steady, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. The gala, meant to raise millions for education, was a glittering stage for New York's elite in the spring of 2025. Crystal flutes of champagne sparkled in manicured hands, and the scent of orchids from the table centerpieces mingled with expensive perfumes. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Central Park's cherry blossoms swayed under the city's twilight, a stark contrast to the brewing conflict within. Amara, a 32-year-old Latina public school teacher from the Bronx, was here as a Horizon Award recipient, her invitation a testament to her advocacy for underfunded schools. But to Preston Caldwell, she was an interloper, her presence a challenge to the unspoken hierarchy of this gilded world. Amara's mind raced as she sat at table 3, the prime spot near the stage where her name was printed on a gold-embossed place card. She'd come to represent her students, to network with donors who could fund her school's crumbling infrastructure, to prove that a woman from her community could hold her own in this room. But Preston's words, "This table's for real donors, not people like you," echoed in her ears, each syllable dripping with prejudice. She thought of her classroom, of the girls who looked like her, their dreams too often dismissed. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about who got to claim a place in spaces like this, and who was told to stay in the shadows. The usher returned, trailed by a woman in a sleek black dress, her auburn hair pulled into a tight chignon. This was Eleanor Vance, the gala's lead organizer, her expression a mask of practiced calm. Amara recognized her. From the event program, a philanthropist with a reputation for orchestrating flawless charity events. Eleanor's eyes flicked between Preston and Amara, assessing the situation with the precision of someone used to managing egos. "Mr. Caldwell." "Ms. Jackson," she said, her voice smooth but strained. "What seems to be the issue?" Preston didn't hesitate. "The issue," he said, his tone icy, "is that this woman is in my table. I was assured table 3 for my party major donors, as you know. She's clearly in the wrong place." He gestured toward Amara without looking at her, as if she were an object to be removed. "Fix this, Eleanor. I don't have time for this nonsense." The nearby guests leaned closer, their whispers growing louder. A woman in a sapphire gown clutched her pearls, while a man with a tech bro haircut pulled out his phone, angling it subtly toward the scene. Amara felt the weight of their stares, the room's energy shifting from curiosity to anticipation. She knew this moment could define her not just tonight, but for the cause she'd dedicated her life to. She straightened in her chair, her voice clear and unwavering. "There's no mistake, Ms. Vance," she said, tapping her place card. "My name's right here. I'm an award recipient, invited by your committee. If Mr. Caldwell has an issue, maybe he should check his own invitation." A ripple of gasps spread through the crowd. The woman in the silver gown behind Preston scoffed, muttering, "The nerve," but others seemed intrigued. Their murmurs tinged with admiration. Eleanor's composure faltered for a split second, her eyes darting to Preston. "Ms. Jackson, I understand," she said, her tone diplomatic, "but Mr. Caldwell's contributions are significant. Perhaps we could find you another seat, just to keep things smooth." The suggestion hit Amara like a punch. Keep things smooth. It was code for siding with wealth, for prioritizing Preston's ego over her rightful place. She thought of her students, of the times she'd told them to stand up for what was theirs, even when the world pushed back. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Eleanor's. "With all due respect, Ms. Vance," she said, her voice steady but sharp, "I'm not here as a favor. I earned this seat, same as anyone else. Moving me to keep things smooth sends a message that some people matter more than others. Is that what this gala stands for?" The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. The jazz quartet's notes faded into the background, and even the clink of glasses stilled. Eleanor's lips parted, but no words came. Preston's face darkened, his jaw clenching. "You're out of line," he snapped, stepping closer to the table. "This isn't about messages. It's about respect for those who keep events like this running. People who actually contribute, not just show up." The word contribute landed like a slap, its implication clear. Amara's pulse surged, but she kept her expression calm, her years of advocacy kicking in. She'd faced dismissive officials and skeptical donors before. Preston was just another hurdle. "Respect," she said, her voice rising just enough to carry. "Respect is earned, Mr. Caldwell, not bought. I contribute every day to my students, to my community, to the very cause this gala claims to support. Can you say the same, or is your contribution just a check to make you feel important?" A sharp inhale came from a nearby table, followed by a muffled "oh, wow." The man with the phone was now openly recording, his thumb hovering over the screen. The woman in the sapphire gown whispered to her companion, "She's got guts." Amara's words hung in the air, a challenge that stripped away Preston's polished veneer. His eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "You have no idea who you're talking to," he said. "I could have you out of here in a heartbeat. You think you belong at this table? Look round. This isn't your world." The words cut deep, not because they surprised her, but because they echoed every doubt she'd fought to silence. Growing up in the Bronx, she'd been told her dreams were too big, her voice too loud, her place too small. But she'd clawed her way here, through late nights grading papers, through rallies for school funding, through moments of exhaustion that threatened to break her. She belonged at this table, and she'd prove it, before Amara could respond. A new voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, but I think she belongs here more than you do." The speaker was a woman at the next table, her dark skin glowing against a crimson gown. She was in her 40s, with a confident smile and a badge identifying her as Dr. Lena Carter, a museum curator and fellow award recipient. Lena stood, her presence commanding as she addressed the room. "Ms. Jackson's work has changed lives. I've read about her advocacy securing funds for kids who'd otherwise be forgotten. That's the kind of contribution this gala should celebrate, not just deep pockets." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. A young man in a velvet blazer nodded, his phone now capturing Lena's words. Amara's chest tightened, gratitude mixing with resolve. She wasn't alone. Lena's support was a lifeline, a reminder that this fight was bigger than one table. She gave Lena a small nod, then turned back to Preston. "Dr. Carter's right," she said. "This gala's about education, about giving kids a chance. I'm here for them." Why are you here, Murdoch Caldwell? To help or to control? Preston's face flushed, his composure unraveling. You're making a spectacle. He spat, his voice loud enough to draw the quartet's attention. The music faltered, a single off-key note hanging in the air. Eleanor, do your job. Get her out of here, or I'll pull every cent my company pledged. Eleanor's eyes widened, the threat hitting its mark. She turned to Amara, her voice low but urgent. Ms. Jackson, please. We can resolve this quietly. There's a table in the back. No, Amara said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. I'm not moving. Not now, not ever. If you want to side with him, that's your choice. But you'll have to explain why a teacher who fights for kids is less welcome than a man who throws money around to feel powerful. The crowd erupted in whispers, phones now openly raised, their screens glowing in the dim light. A young woman in a sequined dress typed furiously, her fingers flying over her phone. Amara caught a glimpse of the screen hashtag Claim Your Table, followed by a string of fire emojis. The moment was spreading, a spark ready to ignite. But Eleanor's face paled, her hands twisting together. Ms. Jackson, I'm begging you, she whispered. This could ruin the gala. Amara met her gaze, her voice soft but unyielding. Then let it. If this gala can't stand up for what's right, it doesn't deserve to stand at all. The words landed like a thunderclap. Lena clapped softly, and a few others joined in, their applause tentative but growing. Preston's entourage shifted uncomfortably. The woman in the silver gown stepping back as if distancing herself. The man with the phone grinned, muttering, "This is going viral." Amara's heart pounded, the weight of the moment sinking in. She'd drawn a line, and there was no going back. But what would the organizers do? Would they stand with her, or would Preston's wealth win out? And what was happening on those phones? In the digital world that could amplify her stand or tear her down? As the quartet resumed, its music shaky, a new figure approached a young woman with a press badge. Her eyes alight with purpose. She held a phone, its camera trained on Amara, and her voice was steady as she spoke. Ms. Jackson, I'm live tweeting this for the New York Beacon. The world's watching. What do you want them to? No. Amara's breath caught, the question a lifeline and a challenge. The room waited, the gala's future hanging in the balance. What she said next could change everything, but what would it be? The Plaza Hotel's ballroom pulsed with a restless energy. Its crystal chandelier is casting a kaleidoscope of light across the sea of tuxedos and glittering gowns. The jazz quartet's notes wavered, struggling to reclaim the air as the confrontation at table 3 held the room captive. AmaraJackson sat resolute in her emerald green gown, her worn leather notebook a quiet symbol of her purpose. Her heart raced, but her gaze was steady, locked on the young journalist who just thrust her into the digital spotlight. Ms. Jackson, I'm live tweeting this for the New York Beacon, the journalist had said, her phone's camera glowing. The world's watching. What do you want them to know? The question hung like a live wire. And the entire gala, New York's elite, donors, and dreamers waited for Amara's answer. Moments earlier, Amara had faced down Preston Caldwell, the hedge fund titan whose prejudiced demand for her table had sparked this firestorm. His words, "This table's for real donors, not people like you," still burned in her ears, each syllable a reminder of the elitism she'd fought her whole life. Now, with Preston's face flushed and his entourage shrinking back, the ballroom was a stage, and Amara was its unexpected star. The spring air of 2025 seeped through the grand windows overlooking Central Park, where cherry blossoms glowed under the city's twilight. But inside, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. This wasn't just a gala anymore. It was a reckoning. Amara's mind flashed to her students in the Bronx, their faces bright with hope despite crumbling classrooms and outdated textbooks. She'd come here as a Horizon Award recipient, a 32-year-old Latina teacher invited to represent her community at this charity event, raising millions for education. Her place at table 3, steps from the stage, was earned, her name printed in gold on the place card. But to Preston, she was an outsider, her presence an affront to his world of wealth and privilege. His threat to pull his company's funding had pressured the gala's organizer, Eleanor Vance, to suggest moving Amara to keep things smooth. Amara's refusal, if this gala can't stand up for what's right, it doesn't deserve to stand at all, had silenced the room, drawing applause from allies like Dr. Lena Carter, a museum curator, and fueling whispers of #ClaimYourTable on social media. Now, the journalist's question demanded a response, and Amara felt the weight of every eye, every phone, every tweet amplifying this moment. The young woman, barely out of her 20s, wore a press badge identifying her as Sophia Reyes, her dark eyes sharp with purpose. Sophia's fingers hovered over her phone, live tweeting to thousands of followers, her camera capturing Amara's every move. Nearby, guests held their breaths, some clutching champagne flutes, others recording with subtle tilts of their wrists. The man in the velvet blazer from the last chapter grinned, his phone now streaming to Instagram Live. The woman in the sapphire gown whispered to her companion, "This is unreal." Even the quartet seemed to pause, a single violin note lingering in the air. Amara took a deep breath, her hands resting calmly on her notebook. She thought of her mother, a seamstress who'd worked nights to send her to college, of her students, who deserved better than a system that undervalued them, of every time she'd been told she didn't belong. This was her chance to speak, not just for herself, but for them. She leaned forward, her voice clear and resonant, cutting through the ballroom's tension like a beacon. "I want the world to know that this table isn't just a seat," Amara said, her eyes sweeping from Sophia to Preston, then to the crowd. "It's a symbol of who gets to be seen, who gets to be heard. I'm here for my student kids from the Bronx, who deserve every opportunity. This gala claims to support, but people like Mr. Caldwell think their money buys them the right to decide who belongs. They don't. I earned this place, not with a check, but with work, with heart, with a commitment to change. If that threatens him, maybe he's the one who doesn't belong here." The room erupted in a wave of gasps and murmurs. Dr. Lena Carter clapped loudly, her crimson gown vibrant against the crowd, and several guests joined in, their applause swelling. Sophia's fingers flew across her phone, tweeting, "AmaraJackson just called out elitism at the Plaza Gala. I earned this place. #ClaimYourTable." The man in the velvet blazer whooped, his Instagram Live feed flooding with heart emojis. A woman in a sequined dress posted a clip to TikTok, captioning it, "She's speaking truth." #ViralMoment. The digital storm was growing, each post a spark in a fire that could spread far beyond this ballroom. Preston's face twisted, his polished facade cracking under the weight of Amara's words. "This is outrageous," he spat, his voice booming over the applause. He turned to Eleanor, who stood frozen, her auburn hair glinting under the chandeliers. "Eleanor, are you going to let this display ruin your event? I told you to handle it. Do your job, or my lawyers will be in touch." The threat hung heavy, and Eleanor's composure wavered, her hands twisting together. "Mr. Caldwell, please," she said, her voice strained. "We're trying to resolve this. Ms. Jackson, I understand your position, but we need to keep the gala on track. Perhaps we could discuss this privately." Amara's eyes narrowed, her resolve hardening. She'd seen this tactic before: deflect, appease, silence. But she wasn't a teacher negotiating with a school board. She was a woman claiming her place in a world that too often shut her out. "There's nothing to discuss," she said, her voice steady but fierce. "I'm not the one causing a scene. Mr. Caldwell's the one who thinks his money trumps my right to be here. If you want to talk privately, talk to him about why he feels so threatened by a teacher from the Bronx." A sharp laugh came from Lena's table, followed by a murmur of agreement. Sophia's camera caught every word, her tweet already racking up retweets. "Jackson to organizer, talk to him about why he's threatened by a teacher. This is iconic. #ClaimYourTable." The crowd's energy shifted, the whispers turning to bold comments. A man in a tailored suit muttered, "She's right, he's out of line." The woman in the sapphire gown nodded, her pearls glinting as she leaned toward her companion. "This is why I stopped donating to these things. It's all about egos." Preston's entourage shrank further, the woman in the silver gown stepping away, her face tight with embarrassment. The younger man, who'd been smirking earlier, now looked uneasy, his eyes darting to the phones capturing the scene. Preston, however, doubled down, his voice rising to a near shout. "You're turning this into a circus," he said, pointing at Amara. "You think you can lecture me? I've built empires while you were, what? Grading papers. Know your place." The phrase "know your place" landed like a bomb, its prejudice laid bare. The crowd gasped, and even Eleanor flinched, her diplomatic mask slipping. Amara's breath caught, not from shock but from the clarity of what she was up against. This was the heart of it, the assumption that her Latina heritage, her working-class roots, her very existence were less than his. But she'd spent her life defying those assumptions, and she wasn't about to stop now. She stood, her emerald gown catching the light, her presence commanding the room. "My place," she said, her voice ringing with a power that silenced even Preston, "is right here. At this table, in this room, in every space where people fight for what's right. You don't get to decide where I belong, Murdoch Caldwell. Not you, not your money, not your empires. And if you think you can bully me out of here, you're about to learn just how wrong you are." The applause was immediate, a roar that drowned out the quartet's faltering notes. Lena stood again, clapping fiercely, and others followed, guests, waitstaff, even a few donors who'd been silent until now. Sophia's phone shook slightly, her excitement palpable as she tweeted, "AmaraJackson just owned the room. Standing ovation at the plaza. #ClaimYourtable is going viral." The man in the velvet blazer shouted, "That's how you do it." His Instagram live hit thousands of viewers, comments flooding in, "Queen, this is history." But Preston wasn't done. His face was a mask of fury, his hands clenched at his sides. "You'll regret this," he hissed, his voice barely audible over the applause. He turned to Eleanor, his tone venomous. "If she stays, I'm gone, and so is my money." "Your choice." Eleanor's eyes widened, the weight of his ultimatum crushing. She looked at Amara, then at the crowd, their phones a constellation of glowing screens. The gala's future hung in the balance: Preston's millions versus Amara's truth. Amara felt a pang of doubt, not for herself, but for the cause. Would her stand cost the kids she fought for? But she pushed the thought aside. Her resolve unbreakable. She'd come too far to back down. Sophia stepped closer, her camera still rolling. "Ms. Jackson," she said, her voice urgent, "your story's blowing up online. People are calling you a hero. What's your next move?" The question was a spark, igniting Amara's determination. She glanced at her notebook, at the names of her students scrawled in the margins, then at the crowd, their faces a mix of awe and expectation. The spotlight had shifted, and she was ready to seize it. But what she did next would test her courage in ways she couldn't yet imagine, and the consequences would ripple far beyond this glittering ballroom. The Plaza Hotel's ballroom shimmered under the glow of its chandeliers, their crystal facets scattering light across the opulent space. The jazz quartet's melody had resumed, but its notes felt fragile, overshadowed by the charged silence that followed AmaraJackson's. "Stand." At table 3, Amara stood tall in her emerald green gown, her worn leather notebook clutched like a shield. Her words, "My place is right here," still echoed, having sparked a roar of applause that rattled the gala's polished facade. The crowd's phones glowed, capturing every moment, while Preston Caldwell's ultimatum to the organizer, Eleanor Vance, hung heavy. "If she stays, I'm gone, and so is my money." The spring air of 2025 pressed against the grand windows overlooking Central Park, but inside, the tension was a storm ready to break. Amara's heart pounded, her pulse a steady drumbeat beneath her calm exterior. The 32-year-old Latina teacher from the Bronx had come to this charity gala as a Horizon Award recipient, invited to represent her community's fight for better schools. Her rightful place at table 3, near the stage, was marked by a gold-embossed place card, but Preston, a hedge fund titan, had demanded she move, his prejudice clear in his sneer. "This table's for real donors, not people like you." Amara's refusal had escalated into a public showdown, amplified by Sophia Reyes, a young journalist live tweeting the clash, and Dr. Lena Carter, a curator whose support had rallied the crowd. Now, with the gala teetering on the edge, all eyes were on Eleanor, whose decision could shape the night and beyond. Eleanor Vance stood frozen, her sleek black dress and tight chignon a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding. As the gala's lead organizer, she was a master at navigating egos, her reputation built on flawless events that raised millions. But this was uncharted territory. Her eyes darted between Preston, whose flushed face betrayed his fury, and Amara, whose quiet strength commanded the room. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, guests leaning forward, their champagne flutes forgotten. A man in a tailored suit whispered to his companion, "She's got to pick a side." A woman in a sapphire gown nodded, her pearls glinting as she watched. The air was thick with expectation, every second stretching taut. Eleanor cleared her throat, her voice measured but strained. "Miss Jackson, Mr. Caldwell, let's take this off the floor," she said, gesturing toward a corner of the ballroom. "We can sort this out without disrupting the evening further." Her words were diplomatic, but her glance at Preston carried a plea, as if hoping his wealth would outweigh Amara's defiance. The suggestion stung Amara, a reminder of how often principle was sacrificed for convenience. She thought of her students, their dreams hanging on moments like this, where someone had to stand firm. "I'm not going anywhere," Amara said, her voice steady, cutting through the murmurs. She sat back in her chair, her gown catching the light, her notebook open to a page of advocacy notes. "This isn't a private matter. Caldwell made it public when he questioned my right to be here. If you want to resolve this, do it where everyone can see. Transparency's the only way to show what this gala really stands for." The crowd stirred, a few guests clapping softly. Lena, in her crimson gown, nodded approvingly, her presence a steady anchor. Sophia, the journalist, typed furiously, her phone's camera trained on Amara. The man in the velvet blazer from earlier grinned, his video feed capturing the exchange for thousands online. Eleanor's composure faltered, her hands twisting together. "Ms. Jackson, please," she said, her voice low. "This gala funds critical programs. We can't afford to lose major support. You understand what's at stake." Amara's chest tightened. She did understand better than most. Her school's library lacked books, its science lab had equipment from the 1990s, and her students deserved the funds this gala promised. But she also knew that giving in would send a message, that wealth trumped worth, that people like her could be pushed aside. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Eleanor's. "I know what's at stake," she said. "That's why I'm staying. If this gala's about education, it should stand with those who fight for it, not those who use it as a status symbol." Preston scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're delusional," he said, stepping closer, his platinum cufflinks glinting. "This event runs on my contributions, not your ideals. Eleanor, you know what happens if I walk. Your scholarship fund, your outreach program's gone. Is she worth that?" The threat landed like a blow, and Eleanor's face paled. The crowd's murmurs grew sharp, some guests shaking their heads, others filming with undisguised intensity. Amara felt a flicker of doubt, not for her stand, but for the cost. Would her defiance hurt the kids she'd come to help? But then she remembered her mother's words, spoken over late-night sewing. "Never let them make you small, Mija." She wouldn't shrink now. Before Eleanor could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "Eleanor, you don't have to choose between funding and fairness." The speaker was an older woman approaching from the back of the room, her silver hair elegant, her navy suit understated but authoritative. Amara recognized her instantly, Margaret Ruiz, a retired superintendent, and her mentor, who sat on the gala's advisory board. Margaret's presence was a lifeline, her decades of advocacy legendary in education circles. She'd been the one to nominate Amara for the Horizon Award, believing in her when few others did. Margaret stopped beside Amara, her eyes warm but firm as she addressed Eleanor. "Ms. Jackson's place here is non-negotiable," she said. "Her work embodies this gala's mission, real change, not just photo ops. If Mr. Caldwell's support comes with strings that exclude people like her, it's not support, it's control." She turned to Preston, her gaze unflinching. "And control doesn't belong in a room dedicated to kids' futures." The crowd erupted in applause, louder than before, the sound swelling like a wave. Lena clapped fiercely, and the man in the tailored suit joined in, his companion nodding. Sophia's fingers flew across her phone, capturing Margaret's words. The woman in the sapphire gown smiled, whispering, "That's leadership." Even some of Preston's allies looked uneasy, the younger man and his entourage shifting his weight, his smirk gone. Preston's face darkened, his voice a low growl. "You're all making a mistake," he said, pointing at Margaret. "Then Amara, this isn't over. You think you can humiliate me? I'll bury this event." He turned to Eleanor, his tone final. "Last chance. Her or me." Eleanor's eyes darted between them, her breath shallow. The ballroom seemed to lean in, the weight of her decision palpable. Amara's heart raced, but she kept her expression calm, her hand resting on her notebook. Margaret's support had shifted the dynamic, but Eleanor's choice would determine the gala's soul. Would she stand with Amara and the values she represented, or bow to Preston's wealth? And what was happening beyond the room, where Sophia's tweets were spreading, turning Amara's stand into a movement? As the quartet's music faltered again, a new figure emerged, a man in a gray suit, his badge marking him as a representative of the gala's corporate sponsor. His expression was grim as he approached Eleanor, whispering something that made her eyes widen. The crowd's phones kept recording, the moment poised to explode. Amara sensed a shift, a ripple of change she couldn't yet name. What had the sponsor said, and how would it change the fight she'd started? The Plaza Hotel's ballroom glowed with an almost ethereal light, its chandeliers casting prisms across the gold-trimmed tables and polished marble floor. The jazz quartet's music had faded to a hesitant hum, unable to compete with the electric tension gripping the room. At table 3, AmaraJackson sat resolute, her emerald green gown shimmering, her worn leather notebook open before her. The 32-year-old Latina teacher from the Bronx had become the center of a storm, her refusal to yield her rightful seat to Preston Caldwell, a wealthy donor, igniting a confrontation that now held the gala hostage. The spring air of 2025 pressed against the grand windows overlooking Central Park's cherry blossoms. But inside, the atmosphere was a crucible, forging a moment that would echo far beyond this opulent space. Moments ago, Preston's ultimatum, her or me, had forced Eleanor Vance, the gala's organizer, into an impossible choice: side with Amara, a Horizon Award recipient, or appease Preston, whose millions funded the event's education initiatives. Amara's mentor, Margaret Ruiz, had bolstered her stand, declaring that true support didn't come with strings. The crowd's applause had swelled, phones capturing every word, led by Sophia Reyes, a young journalist whose live tweeting had turned Amara's defiance into a burgeoning movement. Now, a new figure, a man in a gray suit, badge marking him as a representative of the gala's corporate sponsor, had whispered something to Eleanor, his grim expression shifting the room's dynamic. The guests leaned forward, their champagne flutes still, their screens glowing as they recorded the unfolding drama. Amara's pulse raced, but her face remained composed, her years of advocacy anchoring her. She'd come to this charity gala to represent her students, to secure funding for her school's crumbling infrastructure, to prove that a woman from the Bronx belonged in this world of wealth. Preston's prejudiced demand, "This table's for real donors, not people like you," had challenged that right, but Amara's response, culminating in her bold declaration, "My place is right here," had rallied allies like Dr. Lena Carter and Margaret. Yet the sponsor's rival signaled a turning point, and Amara sensed the weight of what was at stake: not just her seat, but the gala's soul and the cause she'd dedicated her life to. Eleanor's eyes widened at the sponsor's words, her auburn hair glinting as she turned to face the crowd. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the pressure. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, raising her hands for quiet, "I've just been informed that our primary corporate sponsor, Horizon Enterprises, has concerns about the direction of this evening. They've requested an immediate resolution to ensure the gala aligns with its mission of inclusivity and education." The crowd murmured, heads turning toward the man in the gray suit, who stood with arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Preston's face twisted, his confidence faltering. "What's this about?" he demanded, stepping toward Eleanor. "I'm the one keeping this event afloat. You can't seriously be listening to her." He jabbed a finger toward Amara, his platinum cufflinks catching the light. His entourage, the younger man and the woman in the silver gown, exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier arrogance fading. The sponsor's representative spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Caldwell, Horizon Enterprises values its partnership with this gala, but we also value our public image. The footage circulating online, your remarks, your behavior doesn't reflect the inclusivity we stand for. We're asking you to step back, or we'll reconsider our sponsorship." A gasp rippled through the room. The man in the velvet blazer from earlier let out a low whistle, his phone still recording. The woman in the sapphire gown clutched her companion's arm, whispering, "Their calling is bluff." Sophia's fingers flew across her phone, capturing the moment, her eyes bright with excitement. Amara's breath caught, the sponsor's words a lifeline she hadn't expected. The digital storm Sophia had sparked was now a force, pressuring even the gala's backers to act. Preston's face reddened, his voice rising to a near shout. "This is absurd," he said. "You're siding with her and nobody over me? I've donated millions to this cause. You'll regret this." He turned to Eleanor, his tone venomous. "Fix this, or I'm out, and my network goes with me." Eleanor's hands trembled, but before she could respond, Amara stood, her gown shimmering as she stepped toward the stage. The crowd's murmurs stilled, every eye following her. She hadn't planned this, but the moment demanded it, a chance to speak not just for herself, but for everyone silenced by wealth and prejudice. She climbed the stage's steps, her notebook in hand, and faced the podium's microphone. The quartet stopped entirely, the silence deafening. "Ladies and gentlemen," Amara said, her voice clear and resonant, carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "I didn't come here to cause a scene. I came to represent my student kids from the Bronx who deserve the opportunities this gala promises. But tonight, I was told I don't belong, that my place at this table is less valid because I'm not a donor like Mr. Caldwell. That's not just an attack on me. It's an attack on every person who's been told their worth is tied to their wealth, their name, their background. This gala is about education, about lifting up those who need it most. If we can't stand for that here, in this room, how can we claim to stand for it anywhere?" The crowd erupted in applause, louder than ever, a wave of sound that shook the chandeliers. Lena clapped fiercely, Margaret nodded with pride, and even the man in the tailored suit joined in, his companion smiling. Sophia's phone shook as she recorded, her feed flooded with comments praising Amara's courage. The woman in the sequin dress from earlier wiped a tear, whispering, "She's incredible." The sponsor's representative gave a subtle nod, his expression softening. Amara continued, her voice steady but passionate. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for fairness, for a world where a teacher from the Bronx can sit at the same table as a millionaire, because her work matters just as much. If we can't build that world here, tonight, then what are we doing? I'm staying at this table, not because I want to fight, but because I have to for my students, for my community, for everyone who's been told to know their place." The applause surged again, guests rising to their feet. Margaret's eyes shone with tears, and Lena pumped a fist in solidarity. The man in the velvet blazer shouted, "Speak," his video feed hitting tens of thousands of viewers. Preston stood frozen, his entourage now visibly retreating, the woman in the silver gown slipping toward the back. Eleanor's face was a mask of conflict, her hands clasped tightly. The sponsor's representative stepped forward, his voice cutting through the applause. "Mr. Caldwell, in light of Ms. Jackson's statement and the public response, Horizon Enterprises requests that you leave the premises. Your presence is no longer conducive to this event's mission." The room gasped, the sound sharp and collective. Preston's jaw dropped, his composure shattered. "You can't do this," he stammered, his voice hoarse. "Do you know who I am?" But the sponsor's expression was unyielding, and two security guards appeared at the ballroom's edge, their presence a silent command. Preston's eyes darted to Eleanor, then to the crowd, their phones a constellation of judgment. With a final glare at Amara, he turned and stormed toward the exit, his entourage trailing behind, the younger man muttering under his breath. The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound a cathartic release. Amara exhaled, her hands trembling as she stepped down from the stage. Margaret meeting her with a warm embrace. Sophia rushed forward, her camera still rolling. "Ms. Jackson, you've just made history," she said. "Your speeches, everywhere online. People are calling this a movement. What's next?" Amara's heart raced, the weight of the moment sinking in. She'd secured her table, but the fight was far from over. Eleanor's silence spoke volumes, and the gala's future hung in the balance. What would the organizers do now, with Preston gone and the world watching? And what new challenges awaited as her stand rippled beyond the ballroom, carried by the phones that had captured it all? The Plaza Hotel's ballroom pulsed with a newfound energy, its chandeliers casting a warm, almost reverent glow across the gold-trimmed tables and gleaming marble floor. The jazz quartet, sensing the shift, launched into a soulful rendition of What a Wonderful World, its melody weaving through the air like a bomb. AmaraJackson stood at the base of the stage, her emerald green gown catching the light, her worn leather notebook tucked under her arm. Moments ago, her speech from the podium, "I'm staying at this table, not because I want to fight, but because I have to," had electrified the gala, prompting the corporate sponsor to oust Preston Caldwell, the hedge fund titan whose prejudice had sparked this storm. The spring air of 2025 pressed against the grand windows overlooking Central Park's cherry blossoms. But inside, the atmosphere was transformed, alive with possibility and reckoning. Amara's heart still raced, the adrenaline of her stand mingling with a quiet awe. The 32-year-old Latina teacher from the Bronx had come to this charity gala as a Horizon Award recipient, invited to represent her community's fight for better schools. Her rightful place at table 3, near the stage, had been challenged by Preston's demand to take her seat. His words, "This table's for real donors, not people like you," revealing a deep-seated elitism. Amara's refusal, amplified by allies like Dr. Lena Carter, mentor Margaret Ruiz, and journalist Sophia Reyes, had culminated in Preston's dramatic exit, his entourage trailing behind. As security escorted them out, the crowd's cheers had been a cathartic release, but now, as the applause faded, a new question loomed. What would this room, this gala, become in the wake of such a moment? Amara returned to table 3, her steps steady despite the weight of every eye upon her. The gold-embossed place card bearing her name felt like a trophy, a testament to her victory. She sat, smoothing her gown, and opened her notebook to a page of advocacy notes, grounding herself in the purpose that had brought her here. The guests, still buzzing from the confrontation, began to settle, their phones lowering, but their faces alight with a mix of admiration and introspection. The man in the velvet blazer, whose video feed had captured the drama, grinned at Amara, giving her a thumbs up. The woman in the sapphire gown, her pearls glinting, leaned toward her companion, whispering. She changed the room. Even the waitstaff, moving silently with trays of champagne, exchanged glances of quiet respect. Eleanor Vance, the gala's organizer, stood near the stage, her sleek black dress and tight chignon a stark contrast to her shaken demeanor. The corporate sponsor's intervention had forced her hand, but the cost of Preston's departure, his millions and influence, hung over her like a shadow. She cleared her throat, stepping to the podium with a forced smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice wavering but gaining strength, "I apologize for the disruption. This gala is about education, about creating opportunities for all. Let's refocus on that mission and continue the evening." The words were meant to smooth the tension, but they landed awkwardly. The crowd's response a polite murmur rather than applause. Amara's speech had laid bare the gala's contradictions, its reliance on wealth, its willingness to overlook prejudice for the sake of funds. Eleanor's attempt to move on felt hollow, and she seemed to sense it, her hands gripping the podium tightly. Amara watched her, a pang of empathy mixing with resolve. Eleanor was caught in a system, just as she was, but systems could change. Tonight had proven that. Lena Carter, the museum curator in a crimson gown, approached Amara's table, her smile warm but fierce. "You were phenomenal up there," she said, resting a hand on Amara's shoulder. "This room needed that shake-up. I've been to too many of these events where people like us are just tokens. You made them see us." Her words carried the weight of shared experience, and Amara nodded, gratitude swelling in her chest. Lena's support had been a lifeline, a reminder that this fight wasn't hers alone. Margaret Ruiz, Amara's mentor, joined them, her silver hair elegant against her navy suit. "You spoke from the heart," she said, her voice soft but proud. "That's why they listened. You didn't just defend your seat, you defended what this gala should be." Margaret's presence, as a retired superintendent and board member, carried authority, and her words bolstered Amara's resolve. She wasn't just a teacher tonight, she was a catalyst, and the room was beginning to reflect that. Guests began to approach table 3, their hesitancy giving way to sincerity. A man in a tailored suit, who'd clapped during Amara's speech, extended his hand. "I'm David Lin, tech investor," he said. "Your students are lucky to have you. I'd like to talk about funding your school's science lab." No strings attached. Amara shook his hand, her surprise tempered by hope. A woman in a sequin dress followed, her eyes bright with tears. "I teach in Harlem," she said. "What you did, it's what I want my kids to see. Can I bring them to meet you?" Amara smiled, her notebook already open to jot down her contact information. The gala resumed, but it was different now. The jazz quartet played with renewed vigor, and conversations turned from small talk to substance. Guests discussed equity, sharing stories of their own encounters with exclusion. The woman in the sapphire gown admitted to her companion, "I've been complicit, staying quiet at events like this. No more." The man in the velvet blazer, now mingling, said to a group, "She made me rethink who I'm investing in." Impact over image. Even the corporate sponsor's representative, standing near Eleanor, nodded as he spoke to a colleague, his earlier grimness replaced by cautious optimism. Sophia Reyes, the journalist, approached Amara, her press badge glinting. "Your speech is trending worldwide," she said, showing Amara her phone. The screen displayed thousands of retweets, comments praising Amara's courage, and videos of her podium moment shared across platforms. "People are pledging donations to your school district, and there's a petition to name a scholarship after you. This is bigger than the gala." Amara's breath caught, the scale of it overwhelming. She'd fought for her table, but the world was claiming her cause. Eleanor, still at the podium, took a deep breath, her voice steadier now. "Before we continue," she said, "I owe an apology to Ms. Jackson and to all of you. This gala lost its way, prioritizing wealth over values. That changes tonight. We're committing to transparency in our seating, diversity in our leadership, and a fund to support educators like Ms. Jackson. We'll do better." The crowd applauded, the sound genuine, and Amara met Eleanor's gaze, seeing a flicker of sincerity. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start. As the evening progressed, Amara felt the room's transformation in every interaction. Guests pledged support for her school. From books to tech grants, Lena and Margaret stayed close, strategizing next steps, while Sophia documented it all, her journalism amplifying the change. The gala's mission to fund education felt real again, grounded in the faces of Amara's students, whose futures now seemed brighter. But a quiet unease lingered. Preston's exit wasn't the end. His influence ran deep, and Amara knew men like him didn't fade quietly. What would his next move be, and how would it test the fragile progress of this night? As the quartet played on, a new figure approached a board member with a worried expression, whispering to Eleanor about an urgent call from a major donor. Amara caught the exchange, her instincts sharpening. The fight for her table was won, but the war for change was just beginning, and the world outside was waiting to see what she'd do next. The Bronx classroom buzzed with a quiet energy, sunlight streaming through newly cleaned windows to illuminate rows of desks, adorned with fresh notebooks and colorful posters. It was late May 2025, weeks after the fateful gala at the Plaza Hotel, and AmaraJackson stood at the front, her emerald green gown replaced by a simple blazer and jeans, her worn leather notebook open on the teacher's desk. The 32-year-old Latina educator, once a guest in a glittering ballroom, was back where she belonged among her students, whose faces glowed with pride as she shared the story of the night she claimed. Her place, outside, the city hummed, but inside this classroom, a legacy was taking root, one that had begun with a single table and now promised to reshape the world. The gala had been a turning point, a night when Amara's refusal to yield her seat at table 3 to Preston Caldwell, a prejudiced hedge fund titan, had sparked a movement. His demand, "This table's for real donors, not people like you," had ignited a confrontation that exposed elitism, rallied allies like Dr. Lena Carter, mentor Margaret Ruiz, and journalist Sophia Reyes, and culminated in Amara's powerful speech from the stage. The corporate sponsor's decision to oust Preston had transformed the ballroom, and the guests' pledges had begun to shift the gala's mission toward true equity. But the real change, Amara knew, was happening now in the weeks that followed as the world responded to her stand. Amara's classroom, once plagued by outdated textbooks and a leaking ceiling, was now a beacon of possibility. The viral storm sparked by Sophia's live tweeting had flooded her school district with donations, books, laptops, science equipment, even a renovated library with a mural of Amara at the gala, painted by her students. David Lin, the tech investor who'd approached her that night, had funded a state-of-the-art STEM lab, his handshake a promise kept. The woman in the sequin dress, a Harlem teacher, had brought her students to visit, their wide-eyed questions about Amara's courage inspiring a new generation. As Amara looked at her class, she saw the faces of those kids in her own bright, determined, ready to dream bigger than their circumstances. The gala's organizers, led by Eleanor Vance, had made good on their apology. A public statement, issued days after the event, acknowledged their failure to uphold inclusivity and outlined reforms, transparent seating policies, diversity training for staff, and a new advisory board with Margaret Ruiz at its helm. Most significantly, they'd established the AmaraJackson Scholarship Fund, aimed at supporting underrepresented educators nationwide. Amara had been skeptical at first, wary of tokenism, but when Eleanor personally invited her to co-chair the fund, she saw sincerity in the organizer's eyes. A woman changed by the night. She'd nearly lost everything. The fund's first grants had already launched, with recipients sending Amara letters of gratitude, their words a reminder of the movement's reach. Preston Caldwell's downfall had been swift and public. The videos of his prejudiced remarks, shared millions of times, had tarnished his reputation. Clients pulled investments from Caldwell Investments, citing ethical concerns, and as gentrification projects in low-income neighborhoods faced protests, a New York beacon. Expose, penned by Sophia, detailed his history of exclusionary practices, sealing his decline. Amara felt no joy in his ruin, only a quiet resolve. Men like Preston thrived on silence, and her voice amplified by the crowd's phones, by allies, by truth had broken that silence. Beyond the gala, Amara's stand had ignited a national conversation. Talk shows invited her to speak, her poised responses earning standing ovations. Community organizers cited her as inspiration, launching campaigns to challenge elitism in their own cities. A viral video series, produced by Sophia, chronicled the stories of others who'd claimed their place: nurses, artists, students, each crediting Amara's courage. The movement, dubbed "Claim Your Table" in online discussions, had become a rallying cry. Its message clear: everyone deserved a seat, no matter their background. Amara's life had changed, too. She'd been promoted to a district-wide advocacy role, balancing teaching with speaking engagements, her notebook now filled with policy proposals alongside student names. Yet she remained grounded, her Bronx roots unshaken. She still rode the subway, still graded papers late at night, still called her mother to share every milestone. Her students, sensing her authenticity, had become her fiercest champions, their essays about the gala brimming with pride. One girl, Maria, had written, "Ms. Jackson showed me I can be loud, even when they want me quiet." Amara kept that essay taped to her desk, a reminder of why she'd fought. Today, as her class worked on a project about community heroes, Amara felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Lena Carter, the museum curator whose support had bolstered her at the gala. Lena, in town for a conference, had stopped by with a gift, a framed photo of Amara at table 3, her emerald gown vivid, her expression fierce. "For your classroom," Lena said, her crimson lipstick curving into a smile. "A reminder of the night you changed us all." Amara hugged her, the photo a tangible link to that glittering, tumultuous evening. Margaret Ruiz had called earlier, sharing news of the scholarship fund's expansion, funded by new donors inspired by Amara's story. Sophia, now a rising star at the Beacon, had texted about a documentary in the works, with Amara as its heart. Even Eleanor had reached out, inviting Amara to the next gala as a keynote speaker, a role she'd accepted with conditions. No more tables reserved for wealth alone. The promises kept coming, each a brick in the foundation Amara had laid. As the school bell rang, Amara gathered her students, their chatter filling the room. She held up the framed photo, her voice steady but warm. "This is from a night I stood up for what's right," she said, "not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. You all have that power to claim your place, to make the world fairer. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." The students clapped, their eyes bright, and Maria raised her hand. "Ms. Jackson," she said, "you're a hero." Amara smiled, her heart full. The gala had been one night, one table, but its impact was a legacy: classrooms revitalized, systems reformed, voices uplifted. She thought of the ballroom, its chandeliers and cherry blossom views, and realized the real transformation wasn't there, but here, in the faces of her students, in the world they'd inherit. She closed her notebook, its pages now a chronicle of triumph, and addressed the class, her words a call to action. "Your turn," she said. "Find your table, whatever it is, and claim it. Not just for you, but for everyone who's been told they don't belong. That's how we change the world." The students cheered, their voices a promise of the future. Amara looked out the window, the Bronx skyline steady against the horizon, and knew this was only the beginning. The movement she'd sparked would grow, carried by those she'd inspired, each claiming their place until no one could be silenced. And as the sun set, casting golden light across her classroom, Amara felt the weight of her legacy: not just a seat, but a world where everyone belonged.